Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day of AAUC's 2025 Leadership Summit. We welcome you and very much value your attendance, and we are going to begin our panels here in just a moment. Our first session is going to be focusing on the topic of from community to capital, mobilizing the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders for civic leadership. How does that occur? How do you persuade your communities to participate in civic engagement, public service, in the political arena in order to advocate for your own community's civil, political, and economic interests? It's not an easy task. And the one thing that I have learned in working in this area for 20 years is a saying that I've heard many times in the past: power is never given to you. You must take it. And the process of taking power is, first of all, developing the network and the relationships within your own community in order to have communications and develop a relationship of a trusted messenger. And I think that is one of the primary and elementary foundations of mobilizing the community going forward. We have excellent panelists today that I would like to now provide them with an opportunity to self-introduce and give a short presentation of your experiences in the past. And I would like to start first to my immediate left. Devin Jiang.
I feel like I don't need a microphone. Good morning, everyone.
Devin, use the microphone.
Gotta listen to the boss, right? All right, how's now? It's good? All right, good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing today? Good. My name's Devin Jiang. I am a recent graduate of the University of Delaware. And I am a staff assistant for U.S. Senator Chris Coons from Delaware. And so my story really began in 2020. I was in high school, and I was concerned about the rise of hate crimes against Asian Americans. And so I was really concerned. And so in college, I had a lot of opportunities to engage within the legislative process. You know, I did internships with the Delaware state government. I did internships on political campaigns and even in the Biden administration. And so Delaware is a really small state. And right now, you know, on the national level, we're talking about how we need to take the temperature down and how we need to really come together and unite together. But we've always been doing this in Delaware because we only have 1 million people. And so you really can't be hateful towards other people because you might see them at the grocery store or, you know, at your kids' sports games. And so Delaware, you know, based on my experiences there in the government, you know, it's so easy to meet people, you know, have those close interactions and build a lot of relationships. And so in college, I started a nonprofit called Make Us Visible Delaware. We wanted to include Asian American history in Delaware schools from K-12. And so in 1 year of a lot of coalition building, advocacy, bringing people together, we brought together students, parents, teachers, and the Asian American community in Delaware. And in 2024, we passed a law in Delaware that not only required Asian American history to be included in every K-12 school in Delaware, but we are successful in incorporating not just Asian American history, but Black history, Hispanic history, and all the histories of every ethnic, racial, cultural group mandated in our state curriculum. So super happy to be here today and with these other panelists and excited to talk about, you know, relationship building and issue advocacy.
Good morning. Thank you, Jack. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chhaya Chhoum. I go by she, her. I am the co-executive director of the Southeast Asian Freedom Network, as well as, which is our C3, and SEAFN, which is our C4. And so I'll share with you all like what that means to be able to choose those two entities to really mobilize and organize our community. And so I come from the Bronx in New York. I was resettled in 1985 as part of the largest refugee resettlement program in U.S. history. I came after the genocide in Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge genocide, and the war in Southeast Asia. And so the Bronx have been my home ever since, and I've been organizing since I was 16, so it's really great to see young people on here, and you can tell my hair is gray. Don't ask my age, but I'm old. I've been doing this for a very long time. And to see the elders in the room as well. So I think that, you know, the task at hand for all of us is that, you know, it's going to take multi-generation to undo one generation's trauma. So I'll talk a little bit about what that means for the Southeast Asian refugee community here. And, you know, the largest thing that we're facing right now is the deportations of refugees. And I'll share more about our national campaign to end Southeast Asian deportation. Yeah, that's it for now, and then I'll pass it to you.
Good morning, everybody. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. My name is Wajdi Said. I came to the US in 1988, and as an international student was interested in medicine and pre-med. And it's really an interesting journey for 38 years. You know, in my first few months in Portland, Oregon, you know, I was shocked by a news of a killing of a young man from Ethiopia, Coptic Christian Mulugeta Sarau. He was 28 years. He was beaten by a baseball bat by KKK skinhead group. And it was shocking for us as international students, you know. He was part of this group. And, you know, being a native of Yemen, you know, grew up in a very, very devout Muslim family with values, is always to enjoy the good and forbid the bad. Many of us, you know, of Yemeni and Arab American and Muslim American at that time, you know, joined, you know, the demonstrations in downtown Portland to bring justice to the three guys that killed Mulugeta Sarau. It was a sad moment that it impacted my life, you know, and later on the invasion of Iraq to Kuwait, seeing almost 50,000 Oregonians opposing the war and the bombing of Baghdad in January 1991. So these two really made me think, you know, that we cannot afford to stay, you know, passive. It's very important that we enjoy and the good and to forbid the evil in our public square. And I'll talk more in details how the African and the Asian and the European Muslims from Bosnia and other places in Eastern Europe got engaged in building coalition, what we call the Beloved Community Coalition.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jyot Singh. I'm coming from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm just a political consultant, not doing all this amazing work that we have other leaders on stage doing in Congress and, you know, the advocacy front, but I'm honored to be here. My journey started as a high school student in 2016 when this Trump guy was running. I was like, who's this guy? We have to do something about this. I wanted to be a lawyer back then. I was interested in public service. I, you know, interned at like the federal defender and wanted to figure out what, you know, my career is going to look like one day. But I walked into the Hillary Clinton HQ office opening in Atlanta, Georgia, and fell into this world and never really looked back. That was a tough night and year for everyone, as we remember, and now we're all seeing the consequences, even to this day. But for me, it was fuel to keep on working in this field, to keep on, you know, putting my best foot forward. So then I went to school in Connecticut at Yale University and did the usual things where I interned for the Senator Chris Murphy in the Hartford office. I worked for him in DC, and kept on just exploring and doing as much as I could. We were electing folks in Connecticut and helping working on campaigns there. And then, had this conversation with myself, as every young person does as they're about to graduate. Like, do I go to McKinsey and BCG for a year or two, right? And do the corporate route and then do what I want after that. But I just couldn't do it personally. As I was looking at case studies of pharmaceutical clients and hypothetical scenarios where you're spiking up medicine 11x or 30x and driving them out of business, your competitors. So I decided to just keep on trucking along and stick to this route. And then, I lived in DC for a year. I helped manage the politics and fundraising of Senator Amy Klobuchar with her presidential and Senate campaign manager, Justin Bowen, at his firm as chief of staff. We ran paid media campaigns for candidates and campaigns all over the Midwest. In 2022, I was in Illinois as one of the two press secretaries on Governor J.B. Pritzker's reelection and Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton. That was a ton of fun, living in Chicago and traveling all over the state and hearing stories of folks from Chicago to East St. Louis, 5 hours away, and seeing those worlds apart. Then I moved back home to Atlanta, Georgia, where I was working as a VP at a political media firm. That's how I met Jack, through one of the partners at that firm, and we've been maintaining a relation since. Eventually, I had noticed this as a Sikh American in this field, that I was the only one working in politics that was on campaigns, that was building some sort of expertise. And, I had a lot of mentors who invested in me, from the senator's office and the Hillary Clinton campaign to people I talk to till this day, and helped me get those jobs, right? But otherwise, I had to figure it out. I had to put my best foot forward. And we have a handful of Sikh elected American officials around the country, and at some point of June 2023, that summer, we had a candidate. He was the first Sikh elected mayor in America, Ravi Bala, the mayor of Hoboken, New Jersey, right across the Hudson of New York City, and he was thinking about running for Congress. And at that time, we had zero national or even local political infrastructure for Sikh Americans. Absolutely none. So Mayor Bala and some other Sikh elected officials asked me to help, start the first super PAC dedicated to electing Sikh Americans and start building political infrastructure for advocates, elected officials, candidates. Like, who do you go to if you look like us, right? And how do you run for office? What does that even look like? And the donor network, right? We all know, for better or for worse, our dollars speak on campaigns. So took a leap of faith, quit my job, took a pay cut, and we started that first ever super PAC for Sikh Americans that we have till this day. And since then, scaled up my own firm, and we raised $1 million for the PAC, did a lot of good work. This past January, we elected the first ever Sikh with a turban in a state legislature in American history. That was right here in Nova, around 45 minutes away in Loudoun County. This past June, Mayor Bala, J.J. Singh, he'll be later to DC at another conference happening in town. I was his first hire. We built out his team. But that's what this network and this infrastructure building resulted in, right? Folks knew that we have our group chat, right? They can call me. I can connect them to firms that do this for a living. I can find them a manager. I can find them a fundraising director, right? That know-how that we are building together, that AAUC has been building, is vitally important to making historic wins like that. So I'm honored to be here, help relay my experience. Done a lot of AAPI coalition building work with AAPI Victory Fund. They were a client. I did a lot of communications work. We did the biggest AAPI C4 in Georgia, all their ads and supporting local candidates up and down the ballot. So honored to be here, and whatever value I can add, happy to.
Thank you all. As you can tell, I think we've obtained a broad profile of different Asian American communities in different geographic locations, from Delaware to New York City to Portland, Oregon to Atlanta, Georgia, with a couple different generations mixed in between. And that is very, very important because it's a broad spectrum of constituencies that we all have within our each respective communities, and being able to communicate with them no matter what the level is essential. So how do you persuade your community to participate in civic engagement? I'm a firm believer that the constituency drives the organization. And what I mean by that is, for instance, you have an issue such as deportations that impacts the community. When something that significant has that great of an impact, people will respond, and the community leaders need to react in order to galvanize and channel and direct the community to achieve the goal that they are wishing to confront. Now, it can be an issue that you support, a political candidate, or safety with regard to schools, or safety with regard to violence. That is something that people can get behind. Or it can be something that you oppose. Perhaps the tearing down of a community landmark that is historic, or the shrinkage of a neighborhood where the community has had historic presence and relationships. So in the instances of Devin, it was education. And I'd like for you to speak as to how that came to be, that you acquired that interest, what the community's reaction was when you approached them, and then how you managed and channeled the energy that you received from the community in order to achieve your goals.
Yeah, of course. That's a really great question. And I think that before I begin my answer, I need to walk all of you through what was really unfolding back in Delaware in 2020 and 2021. So I think that when you approach an issue, there has to be a problem and a solution. The problem guides the solution. And the problem needs to be pressing enough so that you can convince people that it is worth solving, and then you need to sell that solution. So in 2020, a Delaware state representative, first of all, I should mention that there are no Asian American in the Delaware state legislature. In the House, in the Senate, the governor, lieutenant governor, there aren't any. And there's 62 members of the state legislature. So given that, we had a state representative who was talking with a lobbyist on his email, his state email address, talking about legalizing prostitution. And he did not believe that legalizing prostitution would decrease the number of human trafficking, as what the lobbyist was saying. So in his email, he referred to Asian women as racial slurs, basically saying that, like, are we really going to have less Asian women coming into our state if we legalize prostitution? And so that exploded. That lobbyist forwarded that email to outlets, to people in Delaware, and it blew up. And so now we had a state representative who was referring to Asian women as racial slurs. But, you know, in public, he was condemning Asian hate with all the other people. But, you know, his actions behind closed doors on his email account, funded by state taxpayer dollars, is telling a different story. And so that was bad. And so there was a movement within the public in Delaware to call for his removal, obviously, because he's no longer fit to serve. But the House of Representatives in Delaware launched an ethics investigation to try to see if his conduct was reprehensible and to remove him. But that ethics investigation committee was made up of that representative's colleagues. And so after a thorough investigation, they found that he had no wrongdoing. He was still fit to serve the community. He ended up resigning at the end of his term, not because of his comments, because he was caught shoplifting. So, so that was a big smack to the face of the Asian American community. And it was really bad. And it made me question, you know, how come we don't have any systems in place to, like, make sure that doesn't happen? And Asian hate is sort of systematic when you have your leaders, you know, also perpetuating the same rhetoric, the same lies. And so I believe that COVID-19 didn't make people racist. I think that what it did was expose the deeply seated negative viewpoints that people had towards Asia and people of Asian descent. because these are not new ideas, but COVID just brought them out. And so the problem is pretty pressing. So the solution, I believe that if we taught Asian American history, because I don't remember learning about much of that when I was growing up, I thought if we taught Asian American history and highlighted the contributions of Asian Americans within the broader themes of American history, we can teach students growing up that, Asian Americans, we aren't foreigners, we're not a threat to this country, but, we're actually friends, we're neighbors, we're patriots. And so there are a lot of stories, and one of my favorites is George Yacht DuPont. He was a Thai immigrant who immigrated to the U.S. And during that time, he enlisted in the Civil War for the North and fought in key battles like Chancellorsville, Gettysburg, Antietam, and helped free the slaves, unite the country. But he's not really talked about, right? But we do have Asian Americans who fought in the Civil War. We have them who fought for the civil rights, who contributed to almost every facet of American history. So I thought that if we could highlight these stories, we could sort of safeguard against Asian hate. And so that's what we did. We went to schools. We went to Asian American-owned restaurants. We talked to principals. We talked to teachers. We talked to students and asked them to highlight their stories. We brought them to the state legislature to, talk to the representatives about the bills, talk to them about their stories. And so we are such a small state that once we started picking up traction in the media, our stories became unified and our stories became to be widespread. And then we had the majority leader of the Delaware State Senate reached out and said, hey, I want to talk to you about this. I think this is something we can work together. And so after months of outreach, and we made it our effort to talk to every single state legislator in the state to pitch our ideas, get support, not only from Democrats and Republicans, but from everyone. Even in between. And so we ended up passing our bill unanimously. No one voted against it. And so we wanted to bring that same positive attitude, right? We didn't look to the past and say, your chamber, kind of excused Asian hate, but we wanted to work with anyone and get it done. And so, building those relationships, being in Delaware, I think helps, but making sure that you can identify the problem, you have a good solution, and being able to along the way, pick up supporters, build coalitions, and make sure that people can tell their stories. And I think that's what you lead to change.
Devin, a great accomplishment, and congratulations on your efforts. And my suspicions are we're going to hear from you in the future in some capacity. And so, education is such an important topic. And as Devin has just talked about now, and not only just for individuals and families to prepare, but for the community to understand what is going on and how the world is impacting them. Our next speaker, Chhaya, has a history that started as a teenager, mentoring and teaching students from her community, and was such a superstar at it. People immediately recognized her leadership from one endeavor to another. She has organized the Southeast Asian community for decades, but she's still young. And she, I believe, intends to talk about employing 501c3s and 501c4s and how that interacts with organizing and effectively advocating for the community's issues at hand.
Superstar, I guess. Okay. That'll be my new title somewhere.
Well deserved.
No pressure. Well, I think that part of being, coming to do the organizing work was because we needed to survive, and I think it was, became an organizer and advocate because we needed to survive. And so when we were resettled in the Bronx, in the history, when I'm talking about Southeast Asian, I'm talking about a very particular group of people, particularly from Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Not the geographic the way it's defined in geography, which is the Philippines as well. But we're talking about a group of people who had a very specific relationship to the imperialist United States, right? Like the intervention in the war in Southeast Asia. So oftentimes people talk about this war as if it's like this era, right? They call it the Vietnam War. And so for us as Southeast Asian refugees who came as part of the largest refugee settlement in US history, know that the intervention in the war and the secret bombing that happened in Southeast Asia affected people from Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos. And the consequences to the people of my country when that happened was the uprising of the Khmer Rouge regime, which committed the genocide of over 2 million people. And I was born during the genocide, and so it's one of those things that I'm like, how did I survive? How did my parents survive? And for a very long time, as a young organizer, I was like, oh, I'm a girl from the Bronx, because that's all I knew. I came when I was 7. But it wasn't until I started really doing organizing work, particularly with my mom, who was doing mental health support work for Southeast Asian refugees in the Bronx at that time, and organizing with her around housing. We were really placed in places where there was disinvestment from the community. And I don't know if you remember, in 1985, the Bronx was literally burning. They were burning buildings, and this is where we were resettled in. So my first organizing was to get heat, hot water, running water at 16 years old, and doing the interpretation, translation for your parent, because you knew a little bit of English and you knew a little bit of Cambodian, so you were the organizer. And so with that work, I think what it allowed me to understand is that, being resettled in this country, that anti-Black policies had very specific impact in our community, and we believe that the deportation of Southeast Asian is the ultimate failure of the refugee resettlement program. And so people like myself, who came when we were 7, 2, a baby, never readjusted our status. We just thought we had permanent status because we were refugees, and you get the green card, and it's very expensive to get your citizenship. And a lot of us got, because we lived in over-policed communities, became intertwined and became incarcerated. And then, of course, the 1996 Immigration Reform Act expanded the term aggravated felony, made everyone deportable, and all kind of crimes deportable. And so what we were currently witnessing is the deportation of our people who have criminal convictions, ones that were convicted when they were 16, tried as an adult, for writing bad checks, for DUI, for getting into a fight. And so that is my generation's fight, right? To end Southeast Asian deportation and to end all deportation, particularly in this moment you all know. And so we employed all kinds of strategies over the year, from individual campaign to going to United Nations, to saying that the deportation of Southeast Asian is a human rights violation. And for us, it's so important, as this year marks the 50th anniversary of the ending of the war in Southeast Asia, that the bill that we introduced 2 years ago, called the Southeast Asian Anti-Deportation Relief Act. And part of the reason why we created a C4, a national C4, is because we really wanted to win. We know that as a C3, we couldn't pass a bill and do the lobbying work that we need to do. And so, and as a network for so many years, we were not funded. We never had staff. So when I became the second ED of the organization, we started raising money and building out the staff. And prior to that, I was the executive director of Mekong NYC, and we were doing organizing in New York, in the Bronx. And so we created something called the SEER platform, the Southeast Asian Relief and Responsibility platform, that consists of 4 other bills, which includes the new Way Forward Act, which looked to detangle immigration and criminal justice. And so, and also for a pathway for people to return. The second bill is the Agent Orange bill, which looks for U.S. accountability on the carpet bombing of Agent Orange dioxide in Southeast Asia. The third bill is the Legacy of War bills, which also demands for U.S. accountability around the carpet bombing in Laos, for example. And so for us, the long-term win here is to hold the U.S. accountable. What has continued to happen to our people. I mean, folks know, one generation of trauma, 7 generations to undo one generation trauma. So that is my generation mandate, which is to organize around ending Southeast Asian deportation. And as a network, we became a C3 2 years ago and became a C4 2 years ago as well. But we were organizing already and doing the network already without the resources. And so I think at this point too, as we're living through this administration and living through with Trump 1.0, but really living through this administration particularly, that we actually are thinking about how do we organize and mobilize our community beyond the C3 and the C4. How do we keep our community safe? And when we do win, how are we going to govern ourselves? And so it's going to take multi-generation organizing work. And for us, there's three powers that we talk about or we think about in terms of building power. It's building narrative and cultural power. It's building narrative power and also building people power. And so we believe that, both the organizing and the policy needs to go hand in hand. So that we can mobilize our community in a way that change the hearts and minds of our people, not just policy. And actually, that's been like sort of the biggest challenge in our community, right? Like, our folks say, well, you all are criminals. You deserve to be deported, And I think that if we don't look at the wholeness of how we came to this relationship with the U.S. and whose ultimate responsibility for us being here, the U.S. was over there. That's why we're here, And I think that as the 50th anniversary it closes out, I think for us as feminist Southeast Asian organizers, we are calling for a activation and a moment of acceleration in our community, to do the base building work, to do the organizing work, to build leadership from our community and strong organizations. And we're a network of currently 8 organizations whose budget is under $1 million. And in the last month or so, we've lost about $1 million in organizing. So as a Southeast Asian community who continues to be under-resourced for so many years, and rebuilding, and for my community, particularly for the Cambodian community, because of the genocide, our artists, our professionals have been killed. And so the rebuilding is still happening. Not even just in Cambodia, but here in the United States as well. And so, we're artists, we're organizers, and we know the responsibility that it's going to take to mobilize our community and to build strong organization and leaders and to invest in women. I know that the people who have raised us, have moved me, has always been women. And so not to dig on any of the dudes in the space, but I think that there is something very particular that we actually need to really be in all the forefront of all of our cultural work, that there has to be a gender and queer analysis in what we do so that we can free more people in all of us. And so, so our long-term vision is to end Southeast Asian deportation, but ultimately we're abolitionists and we're organizers, and we know that our liberation is contingent on other people's liberation. So working with building a coalition that really mobilizes together, that create the message together, but that also holds the cultural nuances of our community so that we can shift things in our community too, not just the policy, but that is really important to shift how our community talk about girls, how our community talk about queer people, how our people talk about criminals, how our people talk about, women's work, women's labor. And so our work is beyond policy as well, and that cultural work actually mobilizes our people to take action, and we will continue to do that.
Chhaya, thank you for that, and I can't agree with you more that in the process of organizing and liberating our communities, that we don't leave any of them behind, even though including women and LGBTQ and criminals. And they're part of the process. They need be appropriately, fairly respected and addressed, and we can't leave anyone behind. And speaking of the topic of education again, I'd like to introduce my very close friend, Wajdi Said, who's from Portland, Oregon, and has led the community there for over 30 years. And as part of that leadership, he founded a community center called the Muslim Educational Trust, which was built about 12 or 13 years ago, about a $10 million facility. The community gathers around every day of the week and also operates as a school for almost 250 students, graduating and having students accepted into Stanford, Yale, Harvard, et cetera. It's an amazing accomplishment. Wajdi, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack. For those that came late, I just want to repeat that in 1988, when I came to Portland, I was a young man in pre-med, and a tragedy happened for an African young man, 28 years old, Mulagita Saro. He's a Coptic Christian. And for me, as a native of Yemen, Ethiopians and Yemenis, we share common heritage. That's the Queen of Sheba. And we took coffee to Ethiopia, and they brought us some other stuff. So shared values. It was a shocking news, and I was telling my Sikh brother here, Moderator Singh and Gurpreet Singh, we were classmates. So we rallied in downtown Portland for this tragedy of this young Ethiopian. Lucky that, for me as an Arab American, Muslim American, there were two gentle giants from our communities. One of them was the late Governor Victor Atiyah, Syrian American, Arab American, and he was the first Syrian governor, an Arab American governor in the whole United States. He made history. He was a Republican, when Republicans were focused and positive. So he mentored many of us. He will invite us every weekend, to join him in lunch. And for you as an international student, you will go for lunch, to save money. And not only save money, but we learned from him. The other gentleman was the founding dean of the College of Urban Planning, Nuhat Toulan, Egyptian American. He put Portland State University in the map because of the urban planning. He was came from Columbia University, and he was a professor. And so these two gentle giants, and then Imam Najib, an African American Muslim, coming from the Nation of Islam, and he was a captain with Malcolm X and the civil rights. So the African American community, and Egyptian and Syrian, were great teachers. It is very important to emphasize, and this is for those that are doing a lot of lobby, to emphasize that you are lobbying for healing and unifying, not for supremacy, that you want to be supremacist. You're gonna fail if you have that thinking. You come here to heal and unify our public square, to be a source of healing. In our tradition as Muslims, we are reminded. Today we are talking, me and my brother Sandy Chow and Tran, that God created us, from nations and tribes. For what purpose? The Quran says to get to know each other. So it's very important that when you do work, you have to get to know the other person, because he is your brother and sister, and it is very important to heal and unify. We were able to connect with the African American community to know their story, of slavery. That was an ugly history of ours. We get to know the Native Americans as well, because it was an ugly history. I don't celebrate Thanksgiving, to be honest with you, because there is no thanks in slaughtering of Native Americans. There is no thanks in seeing the slavery of African American. And it is very important for us to understand, that our Jewish sisters and brothers, they are not our enemies as an Arabs and Muslims. Our Hindus, brothers and sisters, they are not our enemies, as Muslims in India. 900 years of Islamic civilization in India was a great history. Taj Mahal is a testimony. Muslims were the minority, but they were ruling class. The majority is still Hindus in India. If Islam condoned violence, there wouldn't be any Hindu would have been existing. Rather than it was a healing and unifying civilizations. And it is very important for us, that we created a program called We Refuse to Be Enemies. It is an Arab and Jewish Muslim dialogue. We have been celebrating our commonalities, our heritage, the golden age of Islamic civilization from 711 to 1492 in South Spain, in North Africa, and many other places. Jewish, Christians, agnostic people, and Hindus and Buddhists have lived and coexist. You know, then in the early 90s, we were struck by the Bosnian genocide, the Afghan, invasion, of Russia, and the Afghani refugees inflicted our society, and then the Rohingya Muslims in Burma. And then how can we integrate them? How can we positively integrate these refugees and immigrants to America, that they are in America today? They can feel sorrow, they can sad, but it won't help them. They have to be positively integrated. They have to heal themselves. We have to heal ourselves, My mother used to tell me, if you point a finger towards Angela, there are 3 fingers pointing towards you. Manage your own shortcomings to be able to build a bridge with Angela and the society. It is very important, that, many of us, as Muslims, we don't condone the lifestyle of the LGBT community. But there was a called Major 9, the Oregon Christian Association. It was a fundamentalist Christian group, evangelical group, that they want to have a Major 9. And they thought coming to the Muslim community and the Arab churches, that will help them, to support them. We said, no, we're not going to discriminate. Everybody has the right to choose their lifestyle, but we are going to say no to bigotry and hate. We stood up with our communities, wherever they need to be standing. We were able, to create, a coalition of the beloved community, where 72 groups, Christians, Muslims, Jewish, Hindus, and people, others. I was telling my brother Raj, we're sitting in the same floor, we're talking in the elevator. We had a Muslim and Hindu group, it's called Acha, I didn't know much about, Hinduism, but through Acha, because of the Pakistani community and the Indian Muslim community and the Bengali community, we were able, to meet regularly. Acha in Indian means in Hindi, and Urdu means what? Good. So we're trying to be good, to each other, and we hope to continue that relationship. It is very important that while we are building coalitions, is to address the poor and poverty in our public square. We're able to create a program called the Islamic Social Service of Oregon, and now we call it also We Care. We care for the poor and the needy in our community, not by giving food, but by integrating those that has the money to be able to give scholarships, irrespective of their background, their ethnicity, and so on. So We Care address the social determinants of health, housing, health, and education, and many other programs. It is very important that we be a source of healing. Again, emphasize the source of healing and unifying. My beloved Jack, brother, as an Arab American, he came to Oregon, we adopted him, we integrated him, and he became a source of healing to many places. Every Tuesday we meet for lunch. Every Tuesday, whatever background you are. In downtown Portland, at Dar es Salaam, an Iraqi restaurant, we meet and we talk, and sometimes we are silly, most of the time we are silly, and sometimes we have an agenda. It becomes, the Mecca of the city. Politicians, especially during the election seasons, they come to that group because they want the blessings of our beloved community, the coalition that we have built, because they know that it is a source of healing. The title of this topic, was a very provocative title, From Community to Capital. I think we don't need to have from community to capital. We need to heal our cities. When Mamadani was asked, what are you going to do, the first thing to do? He said, I'm going to meet New Yorkers. I'm not going to travel overseas. You saw that one, huh? That's the key, that we need to take care of our public space, home here. You want to have a good foreign policy, you need to heal our grassroots. We need to think about our grassroots. We need to think at each other, as humans. The Gurdwara in Portland, Oregon, I was telling, my youth, they needed help, in terms of the zoning, they are in our city, our neighbor, only 3 minutes away. We were organizing them, and we help them, and we assist them, not because they are sick, but also they are our brothers and sisters. We have to look at each other in that context. Our great scholar and great companion of the Prophet, Imam Ali, somebody came and asked him, who is your brother and sister? He said, my brother and sister in faith, or they are my brother, my equivalent in humanity. We are humans first. We have to remember that, irrespective of our color skin, irrespective of that. If Malcolm X was able to heal from being black supremacist to mainstream Islam so he can bond with white America, it's possible for us to heal ourselves. But we have to be serious, so no fingers will be pointed towards anybody, rather than I heal myself to be able to build buildings of understanding and buildings of love and respect.
Wajdi, thank you for that. And I just would like to add, many of us in the Asian American communities have had histories of trauma and war over the last 75 years plus. And that has an impact. And it has a generational trauma impact on our communities. And the process of healing is one that's most important and most constructive as we go forward. Thank you, Wajdi. Joy, your turn. Thank you.
Yeah, do you mind repeating the question again? Sorry, I was just enamored by everyone's responses.
Just wanting to have you speak to developing leadership within your community, what inspires you, how you accomplish it, and how you organize the community to go forward.
Sure. I touched on this a little bit where, first we started the Super PAC, the first ever nationally dedicated to electing members of our community, but also allies, right? Coalition building, talking to elected officials, candidates of all backgrounds, of all ethnicities, of all parties as well, right? Like what issues matter to our community the most. So we started that at first, and it kind of snowballed into, then we had our Six for Harris group, where we finally, for the first time ever, it was virtual, but we got like dozens of Sikh elected officials from across the country ever in one quote unquote room, virtually. And we had hundreds of people attend that Zoom, and young Sikh elected officials from across the country. And that was just another step. Digital organizing has really exponentially evolved, especially since COVID. And then we just kept it going. We have our WhatsApp group, of course, right? Our communities are very active on WhatsApp. So we have dozens of Sikh elected officials and young folks and people who work in politics as well. People have been seeing these elected officials organized for the first time, and the work that we're all doing together on the PAC side, on the advocacy side, on the campaign side. We're helping folks get internships and jobs through our network that we're building. We're helping donors connect to Sikh elected officials and have elected officials supporting each other, building community from the New York elected officials in New Jersey all the way to California to folks in San Antonio, Texas. Oftentimes in smaller AAPI communities, we have like coastal organizations in DC, right? But we've also been very intentional about including our candidates and elected officials in middle of America, right? In middle America, in the Midwest, in Texas, in Georgia, we have folks who are active and wanting to run one day. So I think that's the start of our political infrastructure that we're building as Sikh Americans. But then step two is being in rooms like this and conferences with other AAPI elected AAPI organizations and being on panels, whether it's me or elected officials. We help secure speaking slots, setting up meetings, and being involved in overall broader AAPI coalition building, because our voting bloc has drastically gained significance in the past, especially for 4 years. and especially in Georgia, which I'll talk about later. I think coalition building, right, plugging our communities in, so we're not just talking to each other, but we're building allies. We're able to talk to folks such as Jack Hanna and, bring our issues to the community. And, in Portland, your organization was working with the Gurdwara. The work I do, we elected, I was the manager for the first Muslim woman in Georgia, and we had, a fundraiser for her, and a Sikh community showed through because we've built that infrastructure now where we're supporting our allies. I think, we're just very nascent. This is all in the past 2 years, but the results have been great. And even, this past June, we helped elect the second ever Sikh with a turban in the state legislature in American history. So 2 in a year already. And what that means is, we're also funneling money to these candidates and supporting our community, not just because they look like us, but we're also engaging in the issues. Now that we're organized, right, we're not just going to support you because you're of the same community, right? You have to have the same values where you're advocating to, expand healthcare, because in our religion, in our cultural values as well, the well-being for all, Sarbata Pala, is a key pillar of ours. And, we can tie that into real life policy. Expanding healthcare is promoting the well-being for all, right? That's just one example. And, protecting our immigrant communities, because, my parents came here in 98. So we're very new as a community. There's been a lot of education that has gone into this. And, I think the sky's the limit. So again, I'm honored to be here, Jack. And this is, again, another step in coalition building and building AAPI political power and all the above.
Thank you so much, Dwight. We'll take just a few questions and then proceed to our featured guest speakers. So questions from the floor. Yes.
I just have a question about your statement on 510C3 and 510C4. Can you elaborate on that?
The difference between
Yes,
501.
I'm so sorry. I don't have my glasses on. My apologies. I thought you was looking at him. So the C3, the C4 allows us to do more lobbying work, right? Electoral vote, voting, civic engagement work beyond the organizing or the messaging work that we need to do, the base building work we need to do as a C3. And so when you hear folks talk about a C3 and a C4, they both could raise money, nonprofit, but the C4 specifically allows you to, and I know like you should speak more about this too, allows you to even run candidates, support candidates, say who you vote for. So for example, for SEAFN, which is our C4, we became a C4 a year ago, right, Gaying? And I think for us, as, with the amazing work that folks have been doing before us, being able to elect people in Minnesota, in Wisconsin and Long Beach, California, who are Southeast Asian, but to your point, who also have our values, right? That was very important. So the C3 and the C4 for us is a complementary sister organization that not one just to organize our community, but to also organize around policy and do the lobbying work to win, right? A bill. So that's sort of the difference the short difference, I want to say. And yeah, so for us as Southeast Asian, we don't have too many elected officials, to your point. Like, it's just like we're still building, we're still growing, and I know that the internal work that we need to do, and we know that the term criminals are being used as a wedge, right? And that is what is being used right now to push these things. But these are our brothers and sisters. And so I wanted to make that very clear that, they are, we love our people and we love our family. And so our fight to end deportation is really a fight about keeping families together and reuniting families and healing. I think is a huge part of what you were saying. And so, yeah, that's sort of the difference. And I don't know if you want to add anything else to that.
Yeah, sure. Brief. Basically, a C4 is dubbed as a political nonprofit. You can do campaign work, you can run ads to support candidates, endorsements, right? But C3, you just can't get political.
And speaking as a retired attorney, 501c3 is a nonprofit corporation, and tax laws require them not to participate in the political process of endorsing candidates and spending money on political campaigns. They can educate the public. A 501c4 is not tax deductible as far as donations are concerned, and is authorized to participate in paying for political advertising and supporting candidates. We'll take one more question and a brief question and a brief answer. And if we don't have a question, we're going to not let our featured speaker drink much coffee and sit in his chair very long. So at this point, we'll thank our panelists. Please give them a hand. They were wonderful.